If you fire me, then I'll get you fired. When I was 22, I worked at a small auto shop under a newly hired supervisor. Let's call him C. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary guy. A neat shirt with rolled up sleeves, a short haircut, and a smirk that seemed to promise confidence. But it quickly became clear. Behind that smile lurked rudeness and disdain for those around him. From the very first day, he showed who was boss. He looked down on customers as if they owed him a favor just for stopping by. He greeted every question with irritation, sometimes being downright rude, and then rolling his eyes as if he were talking to flies rather than people. He humiliated workers right in front of customers while silently saying, "I'll clean up the mess. I'll show you how things work." A tense atmosphere began to form within the team. Those who had previously laughed and discussed life during smoke breaks now tried to remain silent. Any word could be grounds for nitpicking. At first, I tried to stay out of it, hoping this person was just a temporary misunderstanding. But I soon realized things would only get worse. The first serious blow he dealt me was when he simply delayed my salary. At the time, I didn't think much of it, thinking it was a paperwork error. But when my second paycheck didn't reach me either, I realized it wasn't a fluke. I went to his office where he was lazily twirling a pen and looking out the window. "They owe me 2 months' pay," I said calmly, trying not to show my irritation. "Oh, right," he drawled, without even turning his head. "You know, sometimes the money doesn't come right away. Just wait." There was a challenge in his voice. He wanted me to argue, to shout, to demand. He wanted to see my weakness, but I just nodded and left. I felt disgusted. I'd worked so hard, wasted my energy, and in the end, they'd simply made me look like a fool. From then on, I began to listen more closely to what was going on around me. That's when I first heard him bragging to one of the mechanics in the locker room about his schemes. He described how he could roll back mileage on cars, sell old parts as new, and forge registration documents. He spoke of this with such pride, as if he were boasting about gold medals. The mechanic laughed nervously, but fear was visible in his eyes. No one dared argue with the new boss. I sat in the corner, pretending to read a magazine, but inside everything was seething. For the first time, the thought occurred to me, what if I write all this down? What if I collect evidence? I had no idea how far I'd go, but the seed had already been sown. Relationships within the team were deteriorating with each passing day. People started quitting. One guy I started with couldn't stand the constant insults and simply didn't show up for work. He fired another guy demonstratively in front of clients to show everyone. I decide who's needed here and who's not. And so one night, late at night, I stayed in the garage longer than usual. I was busy with some reports when I heard C talking on the phone. His voice was sharp, quick, and every word was jarring. "Yeah, I pulled that scam again. No one even noticed. Those idiots think I'm doing them a favor. Ha!" I froze, pen over paper. It was then, for the first time, that I realized that simply leaving this place would be a betrayal of myself. This man wasn't just making life miserable for the team. He was destroying the business from within. I barely slept that night. I lay there thinking, I'm only 22. What can I do? Will anyone believe me against the boss? But if I remain silent, he'll continue. And one day, it will all come crashing down. And I'll know I could have stopped this, but I didn't. I decided I need to act. The next day, I came to work determined to no longer be a silent bystander. Of course, I knew a frontal assault would be futile. I had neither status nor authority, but I had something more important: eyes and ears and determination. From that moment on, I began to notice details that had previously slipped past me. Strange figures would appear in the reports on Desk C. Written off parts would disappear from the warehouse. But in the paperwork, they would be listed as new installed. Clients would sometimes quietly complain among themselves that prices were suddenly jumping, even though the work hadn't changed. I started a small black notebook. At first, I only wrote down dates in short notes. March 13th, salary delay. March 15th, receipt forgery. Then I realized I needed more serious evidence. I started copying receipts that accidentally ended up in the trash. I scanned documents with signatures that clearly didn't match on an old printer. I even took photos secretly on an old phone when no one was looking. Every time I pressed the camera button, my heart pounded as if it was about to burst out of my chest. I imagined him walking in at that moment, seeing me, and then it would be the end. But fear only drove me on. If I was taking the risk, then I had to see it through. A particularly difficult episode involved a client, a woman in her 50s. She arrived in her old car, convinced she simply needed an oil change. An hour later, she was called to the counter, where C, arms crossed, confidently declared, "You have serious problems with the transmission. If we don't fix it right away, the car won't last long." The woman was confused and started asking for details. Then he pulled out some papers and waved them in front of her, threatening her with terms and amounts. I saw her clutching her purse, shaking and nodding. After she left, I looked inside the car. The transmission was fine. All it needed was an oil change, maybe a filter. I wrote in my notebook, March 22nd, client deception, signed a contract for unnecessary repairs. Each such episode strengthened my confidence. I was doing the right thing, but at the same time, the tension grew. I barely interacted with my colleagues, afraid that someone would let something slip. I became suspicious, double-checking to make sure I wasn't noticed. Sometimes it seemed as if C was looking straight into my soul when he cast his icy glances. One evening, he stopped me after my shift. "Listen," he said, closing the garage door. "Are you asking too many questions?" I felt cold sweat trickle down my back. "No," I forced out, trying to sound natural. Just doing my job. He looked at my face for another second, then grinned and waved his hand. Okay then, do it. The rest is none of your business. When he left, I let out a sigh. Then I realized he suspects, so I need to speed up. Over the course of 3 months, I compiled a whole dossier, copies of fake invoices, photographs of cars with their mileage rewound, receipts where the amounts did not match, notes on salary delays, names of clients who were deceived. I hid it all in a metal box under my bed, like my most treasured secret. Sometimes at night, I'd take the papers out, lay them out on the table, and review them. It all felt like an investigation, and I felt like a detective, even though in reality, I was just a 22-year-old with oil-stained hands. But the more I collected, the more clearly I realized Day X was inevitable. Either it would destroy me first, or I would manage to step forward. And then one day this moment came. The day arrived routinely, without thunder or lightning. The morning smelled of rubber and damp metal. I was handing the client the keys to the Civic when C came out of the office, pushed the glass door open with his elbow, and said loudly so everyone could hear, "You're coming to see me right now." His voice held the same false politeness he used before pinning people to the wall. I walked in. The office smelled of cheap cologne and printouts. A neat stack of receipts lay on the desk, and next to it, my job application, stained with a coffee stain. "You're not right for us," he said without looking up. Systematic, slow, too many questions. "2 salaries," I answered calmly, "and the current month's pay." He finally looked at me. He smiled almost affectionately. "You know we can pay later? The law allows it, and I'm not sure you've worked it all out." "There were complaints written?" I asked. "Are they supposed to be written?" He chuckled. "Well, that's it. Leave your pass and uniform in the locker room." I stood silently for a second, listening to the jacks rattling in the service station. Somewhere deep in my stomach, something twisted into a tight knot. Not fear, no, a cold clarity. I said, "Understood." I took off my badge and placed it on the table. He waited for me to ask. I didn't. I closed the door. 2 mechanics stared at me. Someone whispered, "Damn." I finished my shift as if nothing had happened. I completed the safety check, closed the work order, wiped my hands, and packed my tools in my drawer. Each click of the lock sounded like a period at the end of a short sentence. Now it's your turn. At home, I opened the metal box, the very one that held 3 months of my sleeplessness. I reorganized everything, creating a structure so that even a stranger would understand what was going on here. Mileage diagrams, before a slash after photos of dashboards, order numbers, dates. False repairs, descriptions of the actual condition of components and imposed work, customer signatures. Financial discrepancies, receipts where the amounts differ from the documents. Payment delays, printout of correspondence, and notes by date. Testimonies, who saw, who heard, who was treated rudely. I printed the title pages, made bookmarks, bound the blocks with binders, numbered the pages, and compiled a table of contents. On the cover, I wrote in bold letters, "Internal report, Supervisor C." The date was at the bottom. On the last page, I wrote my statement, "Please review and take action. I am prepared to provide explanations and testimony. No emotion, just the facts." There was one important detail left: who to give it to. The owner came by once a week to collect the proceeds, treat me to pizza, nod, and leave. I knew the address of his office on the other side of town. I'd seen it on a bill of lading once. I found an old photo online. A sign, a brick wall, a glass door. Next to it was a small parking lot for 5 cars. The next day, I put on a clean shirt and went there. A woman of about 40 with perfectly straight bangs and a warm voice was sitting in reception. "Do you have an appointment to see the owner?" "An important matter, personal, but it concerns business," I replied, placing the folder on the counter so she could see the neat dividers. She glanced at the spine, where Supervisor C, evidence, was written in Sharpie. Something like surprise flickered in her eyes. "Just a minute," she said, and disappeared through the door. I was left alone. The clock in the hall ticked quietly. Its hands seemed to move with mocking slowness. I had time to think that now I would be politely asked to leave my materials, and we'll get in touch. But the door swung open, and he appeared on the threshold, the owner. Short, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands that betrayed a man who had once handled tools himself. "Is this what you wanted to talk about?" he asked. "Yes, I was just fired, without pay, and..." I nodded at the folder. "It's where your business could die, if you don't stop it." We walked into his office. I sat down across from him, put down the folder, and opened it. He listened silently without interrupting. Occasionally, he asked short, very precise questions. "Is this a before or after photo? Where's the copy of the report? Confirmation that the client didn't request any additional work?" I replied just as briefly, pointing out the bookmarks. He moved through the documents as if they were a map of a familiar area. No panic, no outburst of anger, only the restrained, heavy anger of a man who understands the scale of things. "Do you understand that this is a statement against your immediate superior?" he finally said. "I understand, and I'm ready to sign whatever is necessary." "Do you understand that he won't go away quietly?" I understand, but I don't care anymore. He closed the folder and placed his palms on top of it, as if pressing down on a coffin lid. Okay, I need some time. I need to check everything myself. Are you ready to stay in touch? Yes. He walked me to the door, paused for a second on the folder and said, thanks for that, and thanks for being so neat. 2 days passed in a tense anticipation. I caught myself listening to every phone call. I imagined C already finding out and laughing somewhere, opening a bottle of cheap whiskey, or conversely, tearing up paper into tiny shreds, erasing hard drives, pressuring one of the guys to remember how I supposedly encourage clients to complain. On the third day, the owner called me. His voice was even without unnecessary words. Come to the service center tomorrow at 8 in the morning and stay close to me. I arrived early and was standing at the gate when his black pickup pulled up. Behind it was a silver minivan. 2 burly guys in matching jackets stepped out. Not security guards, more like the kind of security guys they sometimes hire for audits. The owner nodded at me. Let's go. We entered the workshop together. C hadn't yet managed to put on his official smile. Seeing the 3 of us, he jerked his shoulders like a dog sensing someone else's scent. What's this circus? He asked, walking toward us. An inspection? I'm always happy to be inspected. The owner didn't answer. He walked past into the office, placed the folder on the table, and turned it toward him. Sit down, he said quietly. We'll go through it point by point. I stood by the door. My heart was pounding. My temples were throbbing. The investigation lay ahead. Every before and after, every receipt, every call to the client. And I understood. Not only his fate would be decided now, it would also determine who I would be. The man who once dared to speak out, or the boy who was simply used in someone else's game. I exhaled and took a step forward. The war had begun. The owner opened the folder on the table as if it weren't a pile of papers, but a bomb diagram. C sat down, propped himself up with an elbow, and put on a relaxed grin. Okay, he said. Let's play detective. The first thing they checked were the odometers. The owner calmly handed C printed before and after photos, receipts, and work orders. This Camry. The mileage was 187,420. The report says 132,100. Explain the discrepancy. The mechanic's error, C replied instantly. They wrote down the wrong number. The error is repeated on 3 cars in 1 week, the owner noted, and the mechanic's signature on one of the reports is yours. C pushed the sheets aside as if they smelled of burning. Are you accusing me of something? The owner didn't budge. He didn't raise his voice, only ask questions. It was worse than any shouting, a dry, methodical analysis where every detail became a foundation stone for the truth. The security guys sat silently to the side, one making notes, another marking the numbers on the invoices. When they got to the fake repairs, the air in the office grew heavy. The owner called the client, the same woman with the broken transmission. He put the phone on speakerphone. Hello, good afternoon. This is the service center owner. Yes, I want to clarify. After that visit, the transmission worked flawlessly? A pause and a tired voice came over the line. I paid almost all my savings back then. And a week later, at another place, they told me nothing needed to be changed. C tried to seize the initiative. We recommended a preventative replacement. The client signed the agreement. Signed, the owner said quietly. After you scared her with the words, it's dangerous to drive on the highway. He hung up. For a few seconds, the room was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the cheap wall clock. Then the calls started pouring in, one after another. The owner contacted those complaining about rudeness, odd billing amounts, and unexpected extra work. Some didn't answer, but those who did spoke in similar terms. I felt awkward arguing. He was pressuring me. He said the car could catch fire. Each answer was a small nail in the coffin of the same story. C held himself like a boxer who takes punches but doesn't go down. He alternately justified himself by blaming overinsurance, then shifting the blame to inexperienced coaches, then ranting about insinuations. You're ruining the team right now, he practically shouted. Because of a guy I simply delayed paying by a couple of days. For a couple of months, I corrected. He gave me a look that contained everything. Anger, a promise of retribution, confusion. And you, C said slowly, who are you anyway to teach me how to do a job? The owner raised his hand, cutting off the squabble. Next up is the warehouse. We went down to the back room. Metal racks, boxes of parts, tags. The security guards made copies of the inventory log. Write-off dates and installation dates sometimes diverged by weeks. Some parts were listed as new, but in reality, refurbished ones were installed. Look, the owner pointed. Receipt, Monday, installation, Tuesday. But this part didn't actually arrive until Thursday. What was installed on Tuesday? C looked away. Time gap. They brought it in later. Or they put used, the owner calmly concluded. Then came the computer. C had an old laptop in a gray case. He always kept it nearby and never let anyone touch it. That day, he made a mistake. He left the case on a chair when he stepped out for a minute. One of the guys carefully opened it, took out a flash drive, and inserted it into the company laptop. A file with the bland name, invoice_final open parenthesis, 2 close parenthesis, .xlsx, appeared on the screen. Inside were sheets of invoices with familiar client names, with some lines marked UP and ROLL. What's roll? The owner asked. Nothing, C answered too quickly. An internal code. Roll is always followed by a mileage deduction, the security guard said, and UP correlates with the parts premium. C stood up as if on springs. You have no right at all to dig through my files. It's a work laptop, the owner replied, and you don't own the data. The tension was mounting. I saw sweat break out on C's neck and the vein in his temple twitch. He was no longer smiling. His confidence was fading, but he was still searching for a way to act. And he found the most common one for such people: pressure and persuasion. He caught up with me in the hallway. Listen, he said quietly, almost amiably. We started off on the wrong foot. I can settle your payment and give you a raise. Just tell the owner you went too far, that this is personal. You don't want any trouble, do you? I looked at him and suddenly felt tired. Not from fear, but from repetition. The world had seen thousands like him. They pressure, promise, threaten, whisper half-truths, and call it compromise. I want machines to trust us, I said, and people. He was silent for a couple of seconds. Then his lips formed a thin line. Then you don't understand how business works. I understand, the owner interjected. He was standing behind us and must have heard half the conversation. Business is set up in such a way that those who steal reputations are the ones who harm it. That day, we worked until late in the evening. We called suppliers, verified invoices, and compared signatures. At the end, the owner printed out a short plan. Tomorrow, on-site customer survey, cash book review, closed meeting with the team, result, decision, signature, date, time. The night passed restlessly. I dreamed of empty roads and dashboards without numbers, as if someone had erased not only the kilometers, but also the time. I woke before the alarm. The station was unusually quiet. Colleagues exchanged glances, as if we were in church before confession. Customers approached the counter, and the owner openly asked simple questions. How did they talk to you? Did the amounts match? Did they explain what they were changing and why? Many of them were allowing themselves to speak honestly for the first time, and the more honest they were, the lower S's shoulders slumped. By midday, he made a final attempt to turn the tide. He locked himself in his office and began frantically rummaging through drawers, collecting papers, and tearing things up. One of the guys politely but firmly stopped him. The documents stay here. These are my records, C shouted. These are company documents, came from the door. The owner stood there like a stone pillar. And don't try to take the media away. C flinched, as if about to rush past, but caught the gaze of two burly men and changed his mind. He sat up. He realized checkmate was just a matter of time. Late in the evening, the owner closed his office and gathered everyone in the workshop. The sun streamed through the upper windows in streaks of dusty light, and the air smelled of heated metal and gasoline. He stood on a makeshift stage near the lift and spoke quietly, but loudly enough for everyone to hear. I started this business with the understanding that trust is the only thing you can't buy. Over the past few months, some of that trust has been stolen. Today, we're almost done with the audit. Tomorrow morning is the final day. He turned his gaze to C. You'll come too. And listen. C smiled crookedly, predatorily. And if I don't come, then I'll come myself, said the owner. And I'll bring those who want to tell you something in person. At that moment, I realized the end was near, and it would be public, not for the sake of humiliation, for the sake of a lesson. That evening, as I was leaving, I lingered at the gate. The owner's pickup truck cast a long shadow in the parking lot. I suddenly felt it clearly. I'm 22. My hands smell of oil. My heart beats fast, and it all makes sense. Tomorrow, the truth will come here. And with it, the denouement we've been so dreading and working toward all these months. I closed the gate, and the metal clanged like a gong before the final round. The morning was dry and clear as glass. By 8, the station exuded the hush before a storm. The engines hadn't yet roared, the jacks hadn't creaked, but everyone was already in place. The owner arrived first. The security guys followed. At 9, the first customers he'd called yesterday arrived. A woman with a manual transmission, a man with a Camry with a few miles on it, and an elderly pickup truck driver who sheepishly held a receipt with an incomprehensible rush surcharge. C was the last to arrive. He walked in broadly and confidently, like the host of the party, but his steps still betrayed a hesitation. He glanced around the room, lingered on the strangers' faces, and nodded politely, as if he'd invited them all. What kind of meeting is this? He asked, taking off his jacket. An open house? The owner stood by the lift, where he'd announced the finale yesterday. We'll summarize the inspection today, he said, point by point, with the facts and the people affected. He opened the folder, but first turned to the clients. Thank you for coming. Your word is important to us. The woman spoke first. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. She repeated the story about it's dangerous to drive on the highway, and the component needs to be replaced urgently. Halfway through her story, C couldn't stand it anymore. We followed the regulations. Any mechanic will confirm that preventative maintenance. The problem is, the owner interrupted softly, that the diagnostics showed no issues, and the report says the replacement is worth half the cost of the car. Signed by you. The words hung in the air like cold steam. Next, a man with a Camry spoke. He brought the service book and a photo of the dashboard before he'd taken it to sell it on the website. The photo showed 187,420. The report showed 132,100. I asked how that could happen, he said, looking at the floor. They told me, Apparently, the last service center made a mistake. I believed it. The security officer placed a printout from the file, Invoice Final 2.xlsx, labeled Roll next to him. This code, he said, was entered on 4 vehicles per day of work, always in conjunction with a mileage change. Person in charge, C. A low murmur ran through the room. C licked his lips, the mask of confidence cracking. He raised his head and laughed hoarsely. Are you serious? You want to make a show out of accounting errors? You're now disgracing my department because of a couple of inaccuracies and an offended intern who— Enough, the owner said. His voice didn't rise. It seemed to grow heavier. This isn't a show. This is people's trust, and your signatures are under every episode. He began reading the summary: dates, order numbers, amounts, customer names, warehouse records. Each item struck like a hammer blow. Discrepancies, pressure on customers, violation of cash discipline, change in odometer readings. At the end, he placed a sheet of paper with the resolution on the folder. Termination of employment contract under this article. Materials to be forwarded to the competent authorities. Access to premises and documents to be immediately blocked. C turned pale, but still held on. You have no right, he shouted. This is slander. I will sue. Give it to me, the owner replied evenly. But first, hand over your pass and keys. Silence. Only the hum of the ventilation. C slowly pulled out the bundle, twirled it on his finger, and the next moment he lunged for the table where his gray case lay. He tried to grab the laptop and flash drive in one motion, but the security guy was faster. His palm landed gently but firmly on the lid. Leave it, he said. Inventory. These are my files, C snapped. These are the company's files, the security officer repeated. C made another lunge, and something in the room snapped. Not a bone, of course, but a thin thread of pretense. He cursed and threw the keys on the floor. He looked at everyone without a smile, crookedly, wolfishly. You'll regret this, everyone. I know how to talk to the inspectors. I know who to call. The owner took a step closer, to eye contact. Do what you must, he said, and we'll do ours. He turned to the clients and apologized, calmly, sincerely. He promised the excess money would be refunded, the work would be reviewed, the warranty would be extended. The clients listened as if they were listening to a doctor who finally spoke honestly. The woman with the manual sighed and nodded. The man with the Camry clutched the book tighter, then said, Okay, I'm ready to testify. The last conversation was with the team. The owner led the people out of the pits and into the hall. Some kept their eyes down. Others, on the contrary, stared straight ahead. He said something simple. There will be no more deception here. If you have outstanding payments, we'll close them by the end of the week. If you were involved in any schemes, come forward and tell us now. This isn't an amnesty, it's a chance to start honestly. Anyone who repeats this will leave without further ado. C listened, standing slightly to the side. And then, as if remembering he was supposed to have the last word, he turned to me. You think you're a hero? He hissed. You're just a disgruntled boy who couldn't keep up. You've been used and will be thrown out. I looked at him calmly, surprisingly calmly. I simply wrote down what I saw, he replied, and I came through the doors I was supposed to come through. He spat out a couple more threats, now incoherent. The security guys politely led him to the exit. At the threshold, C glanced around. His gaze darted across the walls, across the faces, as if searching for at least one point of support where his story was still believed. He found none. He left. The door closed quietly, almost delicately, the way stories are closed that have been left no room for return. The owner came up to me. He was silent for a long time. Then he extended his hand. Thank you for your work. And for the way you arranged everything. It saved us time. I hesitated. What next? From now on, we'll live as we always should, he said, honestly and loudly. Rumors will still spread. We'll respond with action. Today, phone calls, returns, new rules. Tomorrow, an announcement for regular customers and a free diagnostic for those who have doubts. Are you with me? I nodded. My chest felt light for the first time in months. Not celebratory, but responsible. By evening, the station was humming, but it was a different hum, a steady, businesslike one. We'd already called several clients, coordinated returns, and posted a sheet of new regulations at the counter. A transparent estimate, the signature of the technician and the client under each line, and a before and after photo attached to the order. The owner himself was delivering the money to people, not as a gesture of repentance, but as a clear admission. We did something wrong. We're fixing it. As we closed the gate, the sun hit the glass, reflecting us, tired, grimy, but somehow straighter than we had been that morning. I caught my reflection and suddenly saw the guy in the mirror had grown older, not from wrinkles, but from choice. That night, I dreamed of the odometer again. Only the numbers on it were running forward, as they should. And somewhere in that distant rush, amid the rustling of pages and the clanking of instruments, my phrase rang out quietly, stubbornly. No longer a bravado, but a rule. Do no harm, take no shit. Tomorrow awaited us, a new routine, and a long shadow from the past. But it was a shadow, not a wall. The first days without C were like cleaning up after a hurricane. The sky seemed clear, but trash was still everywhere. We cleared away piles of silent errors, recounting the warehouse, rechecking documents, returning excess inventory to those whose hearts still sank at the word cash register. The owner kept the doors open. Anyone could come in, ask questions, and see how we now worked, without a curtain, without internal codes. The new rules were simple, almost childishly honest. Before and after photos were attached to every order. Estimates were printed with explanations in plain English. The estimated time of work and the part number were listed next to the price, so customers could compare prices online. We hung a sign at the counter. If you don't understand, we didn't explain it well. Ask again. It's funny, but this very phrase worked wonders. People suddenly stopped freezing at the counter, stopped nodding automatically. They asked questions and we answered. And this "we answered" gradually became a new culture. Mechanics didn't hide in their garages. They came out, pointed, shone a flashlight, drew a diagram of the component on paper, explained where there was wear and tear, and where there's still some room for improvement. Even the sounds of the station had changed. Gone was the nervous click of the boss's heel on the linoleum, replaced by the steady, musical rhythm of draft work. Click, tightened, crunch, released. The compressor hummed, and someone laughed. Not nervously, but like before, when laughter was air. Rumors, of course, spread throughout the city. And yes, it was scary. What if someone decided we were a toxic outlet where they were cheating? But the owner went on the offensive. He personally called old customers, visited them, not with excuses, but with a plan. Free diagnostics, extended warranties, transparent policies. A week later, a handwritten note from the same woman with the box hung on our counter. Thank you for explaining and returning it. I trust you a second time. Simple words, but I read them a dozen times. On the third week, a man in a formal coat came to us, an audit representative from the insurance company we worked with. He stood by the lift for a long time, questioning the mechanics, looking at the reports. In the end, he said, if everyone showed before and after photos, we'd have fewer arguments with clients. Record this as a mandatory protocol. We did, and we kept it forever. And C, of course, didn't disappear. Rumors started swirling around town that he was trying to open his own workshop on the outskirts in an old hangar. He wrote on local forums that he'd been set up, that the new owner is hunting for talented managers. Some even supported him. There are always people on the internet who enjoy anger. But business isn't about comments, it's about people of flesh and blood. And people came to us, compared notes, looked at our sheets with stamps and photographs, at the open drawers, at how the owner himself washed the floor in the evening if the cleaning lady didn't show up. They understood and stayed. One day, late in the evening, when we were already closing, C actually showed up at the gate, without a confident gait, without his buddies. He stopped, rested his palm on the net and looked inside, like a man trying to figure out what had changed here, besides him. I went out. We stood on opposite sides. He in the shadow, I in the lamplight. Well, hero, he said hoarsely, did you get what you wanted? Got a job I'm not ashamed of, I answered. He grinned, but without a grin. The way they smile when their teeth hurt. Do you think the world is divided into black and white? In fact, it's gray, man. The client himself wants cheap and fast. You give him a fairy tale, he's happy. We give him the truth, I said. And if it's dear to him, we explain what can be done now and what and later. This is an adult conversation. He looked somewhere to the side, as if there was a different conversation there, the old one, where subtle hints and pressure on fear won out. Good luck, he said and disappeared into the darkness. After that, we heard less and less about him. Either the tax office came by, or the landlord changed the locks, or someone posted a photo of his closed gate with a registered sign on social media. This isn't gloating, it's a physics lesson. Even if you rewind the mileage for a long time, time still catches up. Life was getting better. We updated the sign, fixed the gates, repainted the walls a lighter color, and installed a new coffee pot by the counter. It seemed like a small thing, but people smiled over their cups of coffee as if they were celebrating the complex renovation. A customer's smile is the quietest victory in our work, and therefore the loudest. Something inside me changed too. It was as if I'd stopped living from shift to shift and began to see a long line where each day wasn't just nuts and bolts, but a dash in a pattern I chose myself. I won't lie, it was hard too. We made mistakes, argued, and sometimes we were tired to the point of dark circles under our eyes. But now even our mistakes were ours. Honest, our own, untainted by cynicism. One day the owner called me into his office. A thin envelope lay on the table. This is for you, he said. A bonus. And one more thing. He smiled slightly. I'd like to offer you the role of senior receiver. Not boss, no. We have different titles now. The person who holds the line, the conversation, the paperwork, the explanations. You have a way of speaking that makes people stop being afraid. I stood there holding the envelope, thinking not about the money, but about that metal box at home where the copies still lay. A reminder that none of my business one day becomes your problem. I agree, I said. With the new role came new responsibilities. I learned not to chop up phrases, but to unpack them. Not to argue, but to clarify. Not to defend myself, but to listen until the person hears themselves. At some point, I caught myself repeating the same thought to both colleagues and clients. Honesty is not softness. It's clarity. Clarity saves time. It seemed to be the adult version of my old formula. Do no harm, take no SHT. A third component was added, explain, explain, to the end. The city responded. Families started coming to us, those who previously trusted only the guy from the garage next door. The insurance company increased the number of referrals. A small table with children's coloring books and a box of crayons appeared. My colleague said it was easier to explain to moms why timing belt replacements aren't put off until payday. We didn't become the richest service station, but we did become the place where people ask for a mechanic's number just in case and bring grandma's Corolla because everything is clear there. Sometimes I think about the morning C fired me. Back then, I thought it was all over. Today, I realize it was the start. The start not of a war with a specific person, but of a choice of scale. To live small and be afraid, or to live clearly and respond. Not romance, but a craft. Not a slogan, but a practice. I often tell my interns a story about a 22-year-old guy who didn't come up with a clever plan, didn't hire a lawyer, didn't put on a show. He simply spent 3 months listening, taking notes, and putting documents in a metal box. In the end, he brought the box to someone willing to watch. Sometimes all we have to do is look straight ahead and follow through. We still make mistakes. Sometimes something creaks where it shouldn't. Sometimes a supplier is late with a delivery. Sometimes the person at the counter is angry not at us, but at their own life. But we have a tool that doesn't break. Trust. It doesn't make breakdowns go away. It makes them survivable. And yes, I still get asked if I regret getting involved. The honest answer? There was fear. There always will be. But once you understand that fear isn't a run signal, but a gather the facts cliche, you learn to talk to it. In the evening, when we close the gate, the same guy who looked at himself after the fall sometimes appears reflected in the glass. Only now, the reflection is of someone who can hold the line even when others try to erase it. I tap the metal with my palm, not superstitiously, but to feel the coolness and know that the day wasn't wasted. I still believe in practice. Do no harm, take no sheet tea.